Then came the subsequent vote after the motion to table failed, and 167 Republicans voted no, and that's what you're alluding to on the appropriations bill. And 9 of them were not there to vote, which some might say took a walk. But there were only 75 Republicans that stuck with the Speaker on this in the end. Only 75 out of 246 or whatever our current number is. That's an appalling fallout of the support for leadership in the House of Representatives.
As we welcome you back in for Hour 2 of America's Forum on this Monday morning with Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth, my old U.S. House colleague Steve King of Iowa, on Simon Conway's radio program, WHO Des Moines, talking specifically about that vote for funding Homeland Security that in turn funded executive amnesty, and the fact that a minority of the majority party formed the de facto majority. Bottom line, Republican...
That seemed like a tongue twister right
Well,
there.
when you go through in the House, you explain it like that, and that's what happened. In other words,
I'm following you.
A few Republicans went with all the Democrats to vote for that amnesty, and it points out a lack of unity within the GOP.
Yeah, though it's also echoed in an article in the New York Times that explains a growing rift within the GOP over spending. Senator Lindsey Graham is quoted, "This is a war within the Republican Party, JD."
Well, boy, I've been there and seen the wars, and our guest the entire hour has too, my friend Bob Walker, who is joining us as a guest all this hour. And also, Bob is at Newsmax Washington. Elsewhere in the environs of Washington, D.C., we welcome in the Executive Vice President of Freedom Works, Adam Brandon. Adam, you're talking about a rift between members of the establishment of the Grand Old Party and the Tea Party. Is there any way to heal this thing?
Just this morning on my way into work, I had 2 phone calls. One was from an activist, and the other was from one of my board members. And what they wanted to know is, hey, we're starting to panic here with this King versus Burwell case that's about to be ruled on in the Supreme Court. Are Republicans going to blow the opportunity to actually make a major reform of Obamacare and move closer to repealing it and tearing it out? And frankly, my answer this morning was, I don't know. When you look at the Speaker needing 100 Democrat votes to pass anything, would he work with those 100 Democrats to put some kind of fix in? I don't know at this point.
What's the essence of this rift?
I had a confidential conversation with the member of Congress who almost in panic at the beginning of the year told me, you know what we need to do this year? We need to do anything about something real. And that just has stuck with me. And we need to do anything about something real. Meaning, we don't need to just kick the can down the road on this bill and just reauthorize this or that. They actually want to see a legitimate piece of legislation passed so they could go back to their constituents and say, hey, look, we took on entitlements. Hey, look, we took on spending. Hey, look, we took on, you name the problem. We killed the Import-Export Bank. They're looking for some kind of real piece of legislation to prove, hey, we deserve this majority. We can lead.
But isn't it the case that part of the problem here is the one we faced in 1995, and that is the Senate rules are such that it gives a minority in the Senate the opportunity to hold up a lot of legislation. The House has actually been moving some bills, but they get strangled in the Senate. How are we going to overcome that?
I think the House needs to be unified and firm. I think too often they've started with their negotiating where there's their stand, just laying it out front, like, hey, we're not going to shut the government down. We are going to raise the debt ceiling, but hey, let's have a negotiation. The way I was taught you do a negotiation is you start from your optimal place first, and then you move towards, I guess you'd say, that middle ground. And where I see Republicans starting too often is from the middle ground and then moving further to the left. Now in the Senate, we don't have, and I totally agree with that you used to have Harry Reid standing in the way. But right now, you no longer have Harry Reid standing in the way. But I also just want to add one more thing. When I looked at recent Speaker Pelosi, she forced her caucus to do horrible, awful things. And she made them walk the plank, and they actually did stuff. I hated everything that they did, but at least from their perspective, they were doing stuff.
Yeah, they did stuff, lost the majority, too, in the process, finally, after 2 cycles where they held it. Adam had a private conversation with a member of Congress. Bob Walker is 2 former members. We can have a public conversation. 30 seconds remains in this segment. Bob, what would you do were you Speaker John Boehner?
I would break everything down to very small bites. I would make certain that the issues that we want to address are addressed, but I wouldn't have very big bills that give the Democrats in the Senate the ability to hold things up, make them vote on things that are very, very clear in their application.
Fair enough. That's some rules from Robert Walker. When we come back, more with Adam and with Bob Walker. Regulations. How about that stuff the FCC's trying to pull? Stay tuned. With Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth back with you on America's Forum. And we've got some, this is not to pick on Speaker Boehner, but it shows one of the challenges of being a legislative leader, to wit. Right. EMC research in January, a poll showing that a majority of Republican voters wanted John Boehner to cease as Speaker of the House. They wanted somebody else in that job. And against that backdrop, we have to talk a little bit more about the strategy and tactics of legislative leadership with my old colleague, former Pennsylvania Congressman Bob Walker, who's at Newsmax Washington, and with the Executive Vice President of FreedomWorks, Adam Brandon. Bob, there is always a dichotomy between the constituency a speaker has in his or her conference or caucus and the perception of outside voters. Does this unease with Boehner make his job that much tougher?
Well, it makes it somewhat tougher, but that's always the case with people who rise up through a legislative leadership. You know, you have to get elected by the people back home, but then again, you have to get elected in the conference. And that takes years of work. And so part of this is people saying, well, I don't particularly like the guy who's there, let's replace him. Well, the fact is you've got to have somebody who's willing to run against him. You've got to have somebody who's willing to run against him that can actually be speaker. You have to have somebody that has the popularity within the conference to actually make a race of it. And I don't think at the present time that there's anybody who's superior to Boehner in the ability to actually run the House of Representatives.
Adam, do you share that assessment?
I would personally rather see Jeb Hensarling as Speaker. I think he's shown a great job, but not only to stand on principle, but to get some things done.
All right, fair enough. Miranda, you and I have more than a casual acquaintanceship with the Federal Communications Commission. Right. Not because of any untoward behavior on the air or anything.
Not at all.
But the FCC trying to weigh in on the internet. Tom Wheeler, the commissioner, the chairman of the commission, had this to say after this big document on regulating the internet. Let's take a listen.
While some other countries try to control the internet, the action that we take today is an irrefutable reflection of the principle that no one, whether government or corporate, should control free and open access to the internet.
Well, some would say that the commissioner there, driving through that 3-2 vote, tried to take control of the internet. Adam, what's your take on this so-called net neutrality bill?
It's a very Orwellian term. And my main fear right now, when that 400-page document that we're still having some of our policy guys here at FreedomWorks sort through, one of the things that keeps coming back is a lot of these different changes is moving the internet from this thing that keeps evolving and changing and is very dynamic to more of a utility. So what they're focused more on is, you're going to have certain levels of access and certain levels of distribution. And it takes away the innovation, because I have no idea where the internet is going to end. And what I fear is that that because of these regulations and these more utility rules, and this is going to have to happen and that's going to have to happen, it's going to freeze it in. So all these things that the internet could be someday are going to get frozen out.
Bob, are you also concerned about this? Do you see a chance for overregulation and loss of competition, rate hikes possibly being issued by the FCC?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about it. This has been the most innovative part of our economy in the last several years. And we have seen all kinds of new products come forward. We've seen all kinds of new technologies come forward. And I'm very concerned that the FCC is going to end up giving us a government-run enterprise that will not be very innovative. Beyond that, there is now talk about the fact that people may end up having to pay to have access to the internet. In other words, are we going to put a government fee on everybody who tweets or sends an email? That's not out of the realm of possibility down the road when the government gets involved in something of this type. Let's remember, they stifled the telephone industry to the point that there was no innovation, and it was only after we deregulated communications that we began to see the kind of innovation that we've experienced up until now.
About 30 seconds left, Adam. Some of Bob and my old colleagues, that grammar doesn't work out, but you know what I'm trying to say. Guys on the Hill right now are raising HE double hockey sticks. Do you expect guys in the House and the Senate to weigh in and try to countermand what the FCC is trying to do?
I hope so. And I think you're going to be touching on this in your next segment. There is we have a problem. We have a legislative process, and it's being run amok by the regulators. The bureaucrats in these different agencies weren't elected. Congressmen, senators, the president, those are the people who are elected. So even if you don't necessarily agree or maybe even agree with some of these regulations, the point is they should not be taken out of the Congress's hands when it's such an important issue, such as the future of the internet, where innovation, as your colleague, because Congressman Walker just said, that's where innovation is going to continue to come from in this America. And why we want to turn it into the water department, I have no idea.
And on that note, Adam, our thanks. Bob Walker, stay with us. You do too. We'll be right back.